All right, a couple of reminders for tonight. If you are watching right now, go ahead and give this video a like. It's very simple. Just hit the like button, and we'd very much appreciate that. If you have some comments, you can go ahead and leave them in the comment section. Lots of stuff coming in already. We expect a lot of comments tonight. And if you're new to the Doc Talk Sportscast or podcast, and as well as behind the point spread, if I can spit that out, go ahead and subscribe to our YouTube channel. We'd very much appreciate that because our subscribers are growing each and every day. It's like a little community here. And the more we share some content, the faster you are going to get it. This is Behind the Point Spread. We do this every Wednesday night during the college football season. We're going to take a look at one of the biggest games in the NFL this week. Then we'll take another look at 4 really good college football games. Not a great week in college football, but there are a couple good games out there. Joining me right now, because Dr. Rob just didn't show up for the appointment, Scott Spreitzer. Scott Spreitzer is joining us from Vegas. You know, you would think that, being a doctor, that he could just like make his own time and do whatever he wants, but Dr. Rob just kind of blowing us off tonight.
Oh, he might be golfing. Maybe he is making his own time. So there you go. But
I don't know if Dr. Rob's a golfer or not. I've never asked him. I've never really heard him go, "Hey, I'm going to go out on the golf course." Now I have heard him say, "Hey, I'm going to go hunting." He's got his guns and he likes to go hunting, but I don't think he's much of a golfer. When you're 6'5", 325, I don't know if that's a great golfing weight or not. I
lost you for a minute there, so I missed your story on Dr. Rob there. But you're back now. But.
No, I just said he likes to hunt, but when you're 6'5" and 325, I don't know if that's the ideal profile for being a golfer or not.
Probably not. It's probably a little tougher, but listen, I've been known to be pretty good on the golf course because I can drive off the tee box and hit a ball wash, which is almost impossible when you consider the angle that you have to hit that at just 10 yards off the tee box. So
okay,
people wear helmets.
Being the better that you are, I actually heard this the other day. You tell me if I'm, how they always say drive for show, putt for dough. But if you actually look at it, the guys who hit the ball farthest off the tee, the long drivers, actually end up scoring lower rounds. Is that true? I heard that the other day.
I don't, believe it or not, I don't bet golf.
Really?
I mean, I will sometimes if I have somebody in my circle. I've got a couple that are into golf handicapping and wagering. But when I do, I just take what they give me and bet golf that way. But my own experience is, is just trying to keep it in the fairway, not have to go off into the desert out here in Vegas and get chased by rattlers and bobcats and chip. That's my good thing. But yeah, I mean, I'm not much of a golf bettor. I never have been or a handicapper, other than the fact that I've got a couple of guys that I listen to. The problem is, Travis, is a lot of bettors who do really spend time betting golf in a professional manner, they'll have 35, 40 plays in one tournament. So you're really having to pay attention to what's going on. And if you hit a 15-1 shot, 18-1 shot, that can carry you for 3 or 4 weeks. But I'm more of a matchup guy when I play golf. I want to, or not play golf, but bet golf. I want to see, who is like plus $1.15 against another golfer, and maybe he should be a favorite and play it that way. But yeah, so there you go. There's my analysis on betting golf. I don't follow it, so I just let other guys pick the games for me, the bets for me.
Before we dive into the football games tonight, we got a question earlier. It's disappeared from the comment section, but it was up there before we went live. And he wanted to know what you think about the Tyson-Jake Paul fight, because this is going to take place in Texas. They're going to wear 14-ounce gloves. They're going to 8 rounds. They're going to do 2-minute rounds instead of 3-minute rounds. The last time we saw Tyson in the ring, I think, was 2005, and he was a beat-up man then. Here he is, 58 years old, getting in with somebody, 25, 26 years old in Jake Paul. Is this? Do you even touch something like this? Or are bettors in Vegas and or guys like you interested in the Tyson-Jake Paul fight?
I love betting boxing, but not a fight like this. I mean, this is, is it real? I guess it is.
True.
They're going to come in, but they've got pillows on their fist at 14 ounces. And, it's a situation where can entertainment, I don't want to say boxing, where can the entertainment sports, corporations or whatever, where can they make the most money? Well, they can make the most money off of Jake Paul because Mike Tyson's almost 60 years old. So I always think about that stuff too when it comes to these kind of goofy fights. But I am a boxing guy. The hardest part about me to get into MMA is because I feel like I'm cheating on my first love, which is boxing. And I will bet on boxing and I handicap it, but I'll leave this one alone. I'm like everybody else. I will turn on Netflix and I will watch the fight, but I won't have any action on it, no doubt.
If you want to work with Scott on a weekly basis, you can do that. All you have to do is text the word Doc Talk to the number 29022 and get a free $60 trial of the premium member picks from Scott, or you can visit the website docsports.com. Sign up for the free 60 on the upper left-hand side of the website. That's docsports.com. Don't forget, this is a call-in show, so if you have questions, you can leave them in the comments section if you're watching on Facebook or YouTube. Or you can also just call the show and interact with us. 402-543-5556. It's 402-543-5556. Here are the college football games and the NFL game we're looking at tonight. We're going to start in the National Football League. The Kansas City Chiefs seem to be really good and really lucky at the same time, and that's what it takes to win Super Bowls. The Chiefs are going to be at the Bills this weekend. Then we're going to move into the college game. We're going to start in the ACC with Clemson taking on Pitt. And then we have Kansas at BYU. Of course, the Jayhawks coming off that big win and big offensive production against Iowa State. BYU got lucky against Utah last week. And, you heard their AD complain that basically the officiating stunk. But BYU still unbeaten. And then a huge game in the SEC. This is probably the biggest game in college football this week. Tennessee is at Georgia. Of course, Tennessee has some quarterback questions. Then we'll wrap up tonight with Nebraska taking on USC. Not what I would say a premier week of college football, Scott. We had a good one last week, but not as big games this week.
Yeah, it's not quite the same as last week, but like I like to say, when the point spread is involved, every game could be a big game if you got action on that contest. So again, I'm looking at least 7 college football plays, at least 3 or 4 NFL plays that I'll be involved in this week, and that's before games kick off. Those are pregame bet. Before the games kick off, like pregame, I like to call them bets. And then, of course, I'll be involved in live betting in 2 or 3 games this week. And so for me, every week is a pretty big week when it comes to that point spread factoring in.
All right, let's start tonight with Kansas City and Buffalo in the National Football League. It's Sunday at about 7 or 3:30 on CBS. Buffalo at home, -2, the over-under on 46. I got these lines off DraftKings tonight right around 3:30 p.m. Central, so they may have fluctuated a little bit, but Buffalo at home, a favorite against the unbeaten Chiefs.
And that's where it is, 2.5. I checked right before we started the show. A lot of 2.5s out there, but also some 2s. But, it's the second time this season, Travis, that the Chiefs have been an underdog. They were a 2-point dog at San Francisco a month ago and won 28-18 outright. In fact, we went pretty heavy on KC in that game. They're now 8-0 straight up and against the spread the last 8 times they were getting points, Kansas City. So know what you're going to get into before you want to jump in on Buffalo here. If you like Buffalo, by all means, fire away. But now you know that KC's 8-0 straight up and against the spread the last 8 times they've been an underdog. I heard someone talking about KC being an underplay on the road earlier today, but the total is actually 10-10 over-under, 50-50 in their last 20 road games. So I'm not sure you want to use that stat if it's floating around there on the internet. I do believe we're going to see a higher scoring game in this one than that total at 46. Casey's offense is obviously better with DeAndre Hopkins. The Bills' defense struggles in success rate. We've talked about that before, success rate on the show, about basically it's based on if you pick up at least half the yards you need on first down to get your next first down. So if it's 1st and 10, a successful play is 5 yards or more. If it's 2nd and 4, you get at least 2 yards or more, and so on. And the Buffalo Bills are 20th during their 5-game win streak in defensive success rate. And that's a little sign for caution for me. Outside of Seattle's passing numbers during this 5-game win streak, the offenses they faced were nothing special at all. People can go check it out and see who they played. So here comes KC, 9th through the year, 21st on the ground. And again, they're healthier now than they have been. I expect better numbers as the season progresses with a couple of acquisitions they've made. And, the Bills, well, they're 4th best in scoring in the league. So I think we're going to see a game that goes over 46. Bottom line for me is you can always hold off on this one a bit. It's not moving up. At least it hasn't. And just check out and see how that weather condition is in Buffalo, New York, before you get involved. If it's raining, I don't care. But if there's winds and it's raining, that's when I start to care a little bit.
So right now you like the over on this game?
I do. Yeah, as of midweek, I like the over.
It was interesting. I was watching the bill. I was in Tybee Island, Georgia last week, just south of Savannah, right? And I walked into this bar. It was kind of a little beach bar. And lo and behold, the Bills were on, but it was an Indianapolis Colts bar. I never thought in my life I'd be in Savannah, Georgia, or Tybee Island, and you have all these Colts fans in this beach bar. I'm like, where did all these Colts fans come from? And it made zero sense to me.
Well, my thought would have been that's where the Colts fans are.
True. Very, very true.
They all moved down to South Carolina. Would you say you were Savannah, Georgia?
Yeah.
They all moved down into that area of the country, I guess. I've never seen a sports bar in Vegas that backs the Colts, and that includes when Peyton Manning was on the team. So,
all right, let's jump into the college game. We've got an ACC matchup, and Clemson still hoping for a possible playoff spot. It depends on what happens in the ACC. I don't think it's going to happen. But this is actually one of the better games this week as they go to Pitt. It's an 11 o'clock game on ESPN. Clemson -10. You over under at 53.5.
Yeah, I think we were talking about the bubble burst theory in college football a little bit last week when we were talking about Iowa State and Kansas. And, it used to be when there were 4 teams in a so-called playoff in college football that a team would start 5-0, 6-0, and then midseason when they're cruising, they lose that first game. And it seemed to hurt them the next game and sometimes throughout the rest of the season. And now with the 12-team bowl situation, I think it might be a bubble burst theory when it comes into losing 2 games. And Pitt has lost their last 2. The offense was unstoppable the first half of the season. First 5 games, they averaged over 40 points, over 500 yards in total offense per game. But they've averaged in the mid-20s in the last 4 games. The yardage total has dropped off a cliff, Travis. They're barely averaging over 300 yards per game in their last 4 games. I mean, they've basically dropped off and cut off over 200 yards per game from what they were averaging the first 5 games of the season. Then you look at the quarterback Holstein, maybe a little bit more banged up than we thought he was. His last 4 games, he's a 57% passer, 2 touchdowns and 3 picks. Then I look at Clemson. I'm like, okay, outside of the Louisville game where the Cardinals really ripped Clemson on the ground, this Tiger defense has played well in most of their last 6 games. I think Clemson and the under here, or Clemson or the under. No, those are 2 ways to go in this game. Don't tie them together. I don't believe in parlays, but Clemson or the under if you're looking at this game. And look at Klubnik. He's taking care of the football, 4 interceptions, and he's got 24 touchdown passes. So he's the kind of guy who you can count on not to be making dumb mistakes for the Clemson Tigers. They had that bad day on the ground against Louisville a couple of weeks ago, then righted the ship last week. I think it's a choice between Clemson or the under, whatever folks prefer.
So I guess my question is, why the reason have you seen that the Pitt's offense has just dropped off off a cliff?
Schedule getting tougher. Also, when you lose that first game, now they've had 2 games now that they've lost. So the last couple of games of the schedule being a little bit tougher, we've seen a drop off. And I think it's, again, teams playing a tougher set of opponents than they did early on. And again, I think a lot of, Holstein's problems have not just been offensive line issues or not having a lot of time to throw, but, maybe he was just a little bit more hurt than what everybody thought he was or what came out of Pitt's camp. And he just hasn't been the same. I mean, he's 64 for 113 in those last 4 games. So might be a little something to do with maybe a lingering injury there.
All right, up next, we're going to go to the Big 12. Kansas coming off an impressive win against Iowa State, put up a lot of points, a lot of offense. They're going to go on the road. BYU still unbeaten. BYU got a little lucky last week, but the Cougars at home are really, really tough to beat. Kansas has been in almost every game they've played this year and had the lead in the fourth quarter, just couldn't hold on to it. A little momentum being able to finish against Iowa State last week?
Yeah, I would think so. I mean, the number, by the way, has been as high as 4.5 for a short time. It was
really?
4.5. And now it's down under a field goal at 2.5. But they had to move this game to a night game. I mean, it might not be Baton Rouge under the lights, but Provo's not easy when the joint's jumping in the evening. So why is BYU only laying 2.5 points? That's the question I get asked a lot. The answer, Kansas is, believe it or not, folks, power rated dead even with BYU on a neutral field. And I think a lot of people would be surprised by that because of the records. If you don't follow this from a betting angle, you're going to, oh my gosh, BYU, that's easy money. They're laying 2.5 here. What the heck? That's the situation when it comes to the guys behind the counter making the point spread and those of us who are betting. This is a dead even matchup on a neutral field according to the power ratings. And then, of course, the books have to make their numbers based off of that. They made it 4.5. And the market came in and started gobbling up that number with Kansas, driving it under 3. So you got to think about things like that. And look at Kansas, 6 points from a 4-game winning streak. 19 points from an 8-1 record. BYU number 6 in the latest college football rankings, and they're outside of everybody's top 20 when it comes to power ratings, when it comes to betting and odds making. So, they're outside of mine. I got them ranked 25th in my power ratings talking about BYU, which is only a spot ahead of Kansas for me. The Cougars are 13 points from a 5-4 record. So they're kind of like the opposite of the Jayhawks. And if not for that horrible call in the end zone, when they sacked the quarterback last week, Utah, BYU would no longer be undefeated. We probably wouldn't even be talking about them tonight. The caveat, again, is that if you didn't get down early on this game, you've gone from 4.5 down to 2.5. And while the numbers in college football, when they close, only come into play against the spread, the final score and the spread, about 2% of the time, when you're talking about key numbers like 3, 6, 7, you don't want to be on the wrong side of a 2.5-point move that drops it under a field goal. So it's kind of what's kept me off it thus far. I might jump into this game eventually, but I didn't get the 4.5 and it just kept dropping.
So give that to me again. Kansas was 19 points away from being 8-1, and right. BYU is how many points away from being 5-4?
BYU is 13 points away from being 5-4.
Wow. I mean, just that shows you the razor thin margin right there, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And again, when I'm doing shows around the country and people, that's the first thought. I don't blame anybody for that thought of saying, oh my gosh, how could BYU only be laying 2.5? From a betting perspective, from an odds making perspective, these are even teams on a neutral field.
Look who joins us. He had to play doctor tonight. He's like, then he jumps in late. Welcome, Dr. Rob.
Day jobs.
It's 8:00 at night, man. You're not doing surgery late.
I'm the on-call guy.
Oh,
yeah, we had a couple things going a little bit late tonight.
All right, what do you got? Knees, backs, ankles, hips. What are you working on?
Everything. It was a hip tonight.
Oh, never want to do the hip. We do have a Kansas question coming in, Scott, and this is from Nicholas, and he says, "How does the betting odds for Kansas games that are being played at Arrowhead Stadium?" Since it's not like a true home game. So they used to play, or their stadium's getting rebuilt,
right?
And then they go to Kansas. Do you look at Arrowhead Stadium as like a home field advantage, or is it just kind of a neutral site field?
Still a home field advantage, but I dropped it a point this year. So they still got a home field advantage, but it's not quite what it was in Lawrence or what it would have been. Because, since your guy's been there, Leipold, it's been a situation where they've turned that into a home field advantage in Lawrence, but it's not quite the same at Arrowhead. I think it's a good question. And again, I've dropped mine by a point.
Interesting. So you're laying off right now the Kansas BYU game. This is an interesting one this weekend. This is the biggest game of the week. You have Tennessee at Georgia. Georgia, of course, just got beat at Ole Miss. Tennessee had a win last week. Nico Imalavala, the quarterback, have they made a decision on him yet? Is he playing, or is he still kind of questionable?
Heupel came out, I think it was this morning, and said, or this afternoon, excuse me, and he said that he's looked okay in practice, but he still hasn't made a decision on whether he's going to play or not. So he's going through concussion protocol. Is
that a bettor's nightmare, or you just know right now it's Wednesday, you still got a little bit of time to make that decision?
When I hear a coach on Wednesday afternoon saying the kid has practiced without complications, I kind of tend to think he's going to play, even if he's listed as questionable. If he hadn't practiced yet, I'd be leaning towards he's not going to play. So it does matter, but again, I think the way he's played, and we'll talk about the game and break it down, but the way Nico's played of late and the offense has played of late, I'm not sure it's that big of a deal.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, if you look at what they've done, Rob, we were just talking about power ratings and how different they are than public perception. And we were using the Kansas BYU game as an example with, everybody that I know that's a pro bettor or an odds maker behind the counters out here in the casinos has Kansas and BYU basically even on a neutral field going into this game. Now, obviously it's in Provo and you got to decide how much you think home field advantage is worth. So in this Georgia-Tennessee game, if you look at the playoff matchups at this point of the season, Georgia's on the outside looking in. They're 12th in the rankings, but if you look at the playoffs, how they would match up, they wouldn't be in the playoffs right now. But yet Georgia is still in everybody's top 5 when it comes to power ratings. And as far as Tennessee, they would be in a playoff matchup right now. And they're 4 to 5 spots below Georgia in everybody's power ratings. I mean, they're 4 spots beneath Georgia in my power ratings. I've seen a couple of my buddies who have them 5 spots below Georgia in the power ratings. So it's just different than the way things used to be. This is why we really need, they'll never have a pro better, I would guess, in when it comes to deciding the playoff rankings, but at least get a good odds maker out there who has, no axe to grind. Get a good odds maker out there, put him in the mix, because my gosh, they're just missing things. And I was listening to a radio show earlier today, Colin, who does a fantastic job. The guy's talented as can be, but I'm sitting there and I'm listening to him and he's talking about, and I thought he made a good point. BYU might not be a top 12 team, but this is about qualifying, and you have to qualify, and you can only, do what you can do against the teams that are in front of you. If you win, you're in. If you lose, you're out. So looking at it from that perspective, I think right now the rankings are correct. I don't give a shit. I'm looking at it from a sports betting perspective, and my sports betting perspective says that these power ratings are much different than what people feel these teams are or where they are when it comes to the college football rankings right now. Real quick about Nico, the Vols offense wasn't exactly clicking against Bama, Florida, Arkansas, and Oklahoma. He averaged 57% passing in those games, 2 touchdowns, 3 picks, and he was under constant pressure. He was sacked 13 times, a little over 3 times a game. And so, if he plays, is it going to be that big of a difference against this Georgia team that's going to pin their ears back and put pressure on him?
Well, so here's my question. When you go back to those power rankings versus the playoff rankings, or power ratings versus the playoff rankings, to me, that says we need to expand the playoff. We need to take this to 16 teams.
I agree.
I think you're right, Robbie. I was anti-expansion for a long time, but I'm looking at it now and I'm like, oh, this is intriguing, and we got a lot more parity.
Well, because it's not, I don't think this dynamic's going to change where you're looking at Georgia and going, hey, this is a really, really good football team. And right now, like Scott said, they're potentially on the outside looking in. You're going to have players transferring. You're going to have situations like this now where I don't think you're going to have these, where it's going to be Texas, Georgia, Alabama, and Oregon, for instance, every year, and that's it. You're going to have, those teams are going to beat each other up. I mean, I think Washington bounces back, and I think you're going to have Washington and USC and Oregon and Ohio State and Penn State beating each other up. These teams, I think we're going to see a situation where you're going to have the top 5 teams in the country with a couple of losses here in a year or two.
I don't disagree with that.
And also, by the way, I mean, look at this year's 12 teams that are in the playoff format at the season ended today. Is Army going to beat Georgia outright? Are you going to say, are you going to bet on Army outright over Georgia? Nothing against Army. Are you going to bet on BYU to beat Georgia? Listen, BYU might beat them 1 out of 10 times, if that. I'm not going to, if you don't factor in a point spread and it's just who's going to win the game outright, I'm not taking BYU over Georgia. It's just one of those teams. But again, I thought Colin made the good argument for what we've got right now. This is qualifying time, and you win, you lose, you're out. I mean, it's as simple as that. So, as far as from a point spread perspective and a power rating perspective, we're not going to get it right unless we have 20 teams in the playoffs in the postseason. And I do agree it should be expanded to at least 16.
So what about this game then? I just by listening to you, it sounds like you like Georgia over Tennessee. Even though it's
10,
-10.
I lean towards Georgia here. I mean, it's, again, we talked about the power rating. If Nico doesn't play, then it's going to go up. So if you like Georgia, you might want to jump in now. But they've faced, as of right now, the Georgia Bulldogs have faced the toughest strength of schedule in college football, and they've lost twice. And they didn't look good against Ole Miss. They almost came back all the way back and beat Alabama. So, they're real close to being a 1-loss team this year. And then again, I look at what Tennessee did. I mentioned the passing stats, how they really dropped off against Bama, Florida, Arkansas, and Oklahoma. The ground game averaged less than 4 yards per carry against those 4 teams. And, again, it's always interesting to see how a team like Georgia reacts after you've lost 2 games. But they got to be thinking, we can win out and still get there. We are the Georgia Bulldogs. And I think Kirby Smart will have his team ready to go. So for me, it's like, I think at 10 or less, I think Georgia's the way to go.
All right. Can you guys help me out? Because Sean writes this in. He goes, can you guys please start posting on Blue Sky? What the hell's Blue Sky?
Got me.
Is that another social media channel? I mean, we post on Twitter, we post on Facebook, we post on YouTube. Do you want us to go? Or we post on? Should
I'm
we go
Googling right now.
Should we go to Truth Social? Should we put it on Truth Social?
No.
No. Rob says no. Rob's wife would get really mad at him if we started posting on.
Dude, I'd get
Truth
mad
Social.
at us.
Executive decision has been made.
So we're not doing the Truth Social.
All right, there we go. Blue Sky. I don't know if you can see that.
I can't. What is it?
It's a social media app. It looks like it's a Twitter-ish
yeah, see,
kind of thing.
I don't do Blue Sky, and like Facebook or Instagram has the threads. I'm not doing any of that.
It looks like it might be
Growing?
No, it looks maybe a little bit more of left-leaning, like maybe Twitter somewhere in the
I was just going to ask.
Elon took over. Twitter's pretty pro-Trump, but I mean,
God, no, everybody's on
Twitter,
there.
I think Twitter's kind of in the middle-ish, and then I think it looks like Blue Sky's on one end of the spectrum, and you got Truth Social on the other end. So.
I was just going to wonder if it was outside of the states, if that was kind of where it was based, but it sounds like it's more of a where you are politically type of place.
Yeah, let's create more tribalism. But that's what I love about this show. We don't do that. We just talk sports. Which
we're going to
is
see on YouTube and StreamYard
and all that.
The most political thing I've said in my career was when I wished all the veterans a happy Veterans Day.
Communist Scott.
By the way, Game Dog says, "Hey Rob, most America is pro-Trump."
Well, statistically in the election, you're not wrong.
So, all right, let's dive into the. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm just looking now. I'm going down a rabbit hole.
Don't go down the rabbit hole, dude.
Rabbit holes.
Back here. We need you here. We need you here.
Blue Sky's
you know what I'll say real quick about that? We should have done a show during the election and talked about live betting, because if you just looked at the odds offshore, you would have seen that Trump was going to win at 4:00 in the afternoon. It was like minus $1.85, minus $1.90,
really?
Which is huge offshore. It dipped down to around minus $1.40 at one point, but it was basically $1.80, $1.75, $1.90. And, again, I don't care who you voted for. I love everybody, and anybody can call me if they want. But the bottom line is that it's a situation where, the odds were telling you all day long.
Wow. Now, tell me you're not that degenerate to where you bet on the election.
I don't think that's degenerate.
Okay.
This is what I do for a living. But by the way, I did not bet on the election. So, and in fact, you know what we did? My wife and I, there's a great show on Max called Chernobyl, which is based on what happened, obviously, in Chernobyl in the 80s.
I've watched that one.
Is that incredible?
Outstanding, yeah.
We watched like 4 straight episodes. It's only like 6 episodes. So we watched like the first 4 episodes. That's what we did on election night. Had no clue what was going on in the election until about midnight your guys' time when we finally turned it on. So, but great show, Chernobyl. It's up there.
I'll have to go. That's on Max. I'm gonna have to go check that out.
Yeah, it's worth watching.
Limited series, excellent.
So our last game tonight is Nebraska at USC. We asked you last week, Scott, to come up with some data, if you could find it, about teams coming off a bye week. Both these teams coming off a bye week. Let's before we dive into the game itself, because there's a lot to get to from changes being made. Anything you found out about bye weeks?
I lost it there, Travis. I got you back now.
Yeah. Anything you found out about bye weeks?
Yeah, that they really don't matter either way.
Really?
3 or 4 years ago, and some of my group actually jumped into this in college football more than I did. I was kind of on the outside looking in, adding some thoughts to it. But it wasn't really competitive coming out of or into a bye week, whether you were a winning team or a losing team. It was basically the good programs won anyway off a bye or not, and the bad programs lost anyway off a bye or not. And it just wasn't enough evidence to jump in and say this is something that matters, as far as your handicapping is concerned. And it was also a situation where I saw that bye week teams covered at about a 51.5% clip off a bye week. But in the world of 11 to win 10, 52.3% is the break-even rate. So it's just so close to being break-even, it didn't matter. It's like the NFL. Now, the NFL bye week matters, but it's like the myth in the NFL where you hear West Coast team, oh boy, they're in trouble. They're playing on the Eastern Seaboard. It's actually the other way around. The West Coast team covers about 54.5% of the time. So it's just one of those things I don't factor into my handicapping. And, I was hoping I'd find something over the last few years. The best thing I found was Urban Meyer was great off a bye week. When was Urban Meyer not great? So it doesn't matter.
Well, he was with Jacksonville. He was not very great.
Well, no, they got me there.
So the Huskers go to L.A. This is a tough ticket to get. You were talking about the prices earlier, but they're going to be an 8.5-point underdog. The over/under at 50.5. This is actually dropped. I saw it at 10 earlier. I saw it 9.5 like yesterday, and this morning it's already down to 8.5. So does that mean anything? And you've got a new offensive coordinator for Nebraska. You got a new quarterback for USC.
Yeah, I guess the market likes Nebraska a little bit here. I'm not sure I've seen a game this late in the season in the last several years that screams stay the hell away from it from a betting perspective.
Really?
Because of, moving parts, the term that you always hear, there's a whole bunch of them going on in this game. You just mentioned with Holgorsen now calling the shots on the offense, bad offensive line play going into the last game and out of the last game for Nebraska. What's Holgorsen going to be able to do? How many changes can he make in such a short period of time? And then as far as USC, Mailata, he had a great season at UNLV. He was Mountain West Conference Freshman of the Year when he played for UNLV before transferring. And again, he's quick, he's fast. He makes quick decisions with his feet. He's mobile enough to where he escapes pressure. And when he does get out in the open, he can get it up and down the field. The thing about Mailata when he was here at UNLV and even at USC, the little bit he's played, he's not going to call his number 12, 13, 14 times a game unless Lincoln Riley changes things for him. He's one of those guys that's going to escape pressure. He's going to create more time for receivers to get open. And he's going to probably have 6-7 runs per contest at about 5 yards per pop by the time it's done. And you just hope that he doesn't break a long one and it's off to the races. So there's just so much going on with this game the last week or two. It just really is one of those situations where, boy, I'm just going to have to stay away from it, guys. And I don't even know this new probation now that's been dropped on USC. And they're saying that Lincoln Riley should have been in control of this. It was an oversight of his part with too many coaches and consultants and whatever else. Is that going to factor into what's going on right now with this team's mindset? I doubt it does. But again, you got a brand new quarterback. One thing we know, it ain't Miller Moss. So Nebraska's going to have to be able to contain without getting out of position. They can't just come rushing up the middle of the A-gap or whatever you want to call it and hope to get him. And he's going to stand there and take a sack. That's not Mailata.
See, every Husker fan wanted, like, your pick. They want to know what to do, and you're like, just stay the hell away from it.
Hey, sometimes the best bet in a game is no bet, and I just got to be honest with people. I mean, sometimes I'll say to you guys, if I have a game I'm not going to bet, and I'll say, if you made me play this for my lungs, I'd take side A or side B. This is like, man, I'll give you a lung. I'm not betting it. I mean, it's like, I just can't do it.
But that's why we do this show, is so you can say, like, hey, here's the things to stay away from. If you've got a game with a lot of, all of a sudden there's no consistency here with the rest of the season and you different quarterbacks and new OC.
Right.
That's a good lesson.
In the middle of the year, and you've had what Holgorsen, has he had 2 full weeks? I what's it been, 10 days?
Right, a week and a half.
A week and a half. Yeah.
Max,
how much can he change?
Max.
So maybe
Which, I mean, there's a question for you. Is that something? I mean, it's not like the whole coordinator change thing is a novel concept. I mean, that happens during the course of every season where an O coordinator gets fired, a D coordinator gets fired. How does that play into this kind of stuff historically?
Well, if USC was playing up to their potential and, they lost a bunch of one-score games, Husker fans are familiar with that. A lot of games they could have won that they've lost. If they're, let's say, 8-2 right now or 7-2 or whatever, I'm on USC. I don't care about the changes that Nebraska is making with their offensive play calling. That's what I would be doing. I'd be back in USC here. But they've got almost as many question marks as the Huskers, and both teams need to win. They both have a bowl game potential. They're both right now outside of the bowls looking in. But with all the changes, and, maybe USC hasn't had as many as Nebraska because quarterback's pretty big change. But you're talking about revamping your style and offense there too, to a certain extent, because it's no more drop back passer who's just waiting to get sacked, who runs a 6.5 40. Now you got a guy you got to worry about getting outside and being able to run with the football. Just too many moving parts, like I said earlier, for me to get involved.
Wow. So how's your college basketball season going so far? Good?
I think I've had 8 plays, man. I creep slowly into the season, and 4-4 after last night. So it's like one of those things where I'm just slowly going into the season. No big giant plays coming out of my pocket or being suggested or recommended to people. And I tend to do that until we get about 10 days into December. I will say this real quick for those who are watching in the Nebraska area who might be, might love or hate Creighton. I know there's a lot of folks in Nebraska who hate Creighton as much as they love them. I'm watching Kalkbrenner. I know they're playing, I think, right now as we speak. But I watched the first couple of games. The guy's 29 for 32. Ridiculous. What I did, though, is I'm looking, I'm like, the rest of the team's 40%. He's 29 for 32. They're 40%. Their schedule coming up in the next couple of weeks. They play A&M, Alabama, Kansas, all this coming after Nebraska. And they got people who can slow down Kalkbrenner, unlike an FDU, a Fairleigh Dickinson. And I'm thinking, boy, if you don't see some guys stepping up, you could see another December swoon by the Jays. I think they're 6-8 the last 2 Decembers. So I'm really hoping that Creighton just keeps just blasting teams, blows out everybody, including the Huskers. Forgive me, Husker fans. I want to see them win comfortably, because when they go up against Florida and Alabama and, again, A&M, and they could play Oregon in a tournament, boy, I'm going to be going against the Jays if they can't find some shooting from other players. He takes 32 shots. He makes 29. It's monstrous, and it's going to work against him. You're going to see his numbers start to drop off against the better teams. And that's nothing against Kalkbrenner. That's just the way it is.
It'd be interesting when they play Kansas. That game is going to be in Omaha. I mean, that's going to be crazy, right? You got Hunter Dickinson going up against Ryan Kalkbrenner. That's a great matchup.
Scott, what do you want to see the rest of a team? I mean, because a lot of these good basketball teams will have 1 or 2 star players. What do you want to see the rest of the team shooting on? What would a good team's percentage be?
I want to
50%, 60%?
Yeah, I want to see 2-point shots. And I break it down. I've got 2-point shots. I've got 3-point shots. And I want to see what each team is doing, because some teams are really good from the 3-point line and they're going up against teams that can't defend the deep perimeter. So I break it down that way. I want to see Creighton up around 59% from 2-pointers inside the arc. And they're not close to that as far as their overall shooting, not just 2-pointers. And then 3-pointers for Creighton, because of the amount they take normally, I would want to see them, hitting in that 38 to 40% range from beyond the arc. And so when you see a team that's struggling like this team in other spots other than Kalkbrenner, it does make me think that maybe they're going to be fine come March. But right now, going up against teams, Kansas is battle tested. Michigan State, North Carolina, they came back after losing that big lead against the Tar Heels and got the victory. They covered against Mich State last night. Meanwhile, here's Creighton playing Fairleigh Dickinson and, Nebraska Sisters of the Poor and all that kind of stuff. And they've got to get these other players, I would say, hitting 58, 60% of their twos, Rob.
Okay.
Isn't Nebraska Sisters of the Poor like a college just south of Papillion? There's like some Christian college down there.
I would have taken a scholarship to play for them.
You're the Catholic school guy, Travis. You tell me.
I always remember going out to like the amphitheater, going like, "There's a college down there. What is that?" And Grace University's closed, so that doesn't exist anymore.
And by the way, I'm a Creighton fan, as you guys know.
Yes.
So I'm not ripping the Blue Jays here as far as I hate the Jays and I hope I just think this is from a handicapping perspective of potential, because what's going to happen if they're undefeated when they play that slate of opponents in a couple of weeks? If they're undefeated, let's say they beat Nebraska. If they do, I'm not saying they will, but if they win that game comfortably enough, 10, 12-point win, and it is in Omaha, I believe, this year,
yep.
Then all of a sudden you're getting some value going against the Blue Jays if they're undefeated going into that string of opponents. Nate Oates at Alabama, if he doesn't get into the Final Four again, he ought to be fired with that roster. And then Kansas is Kansas again. They're going to be great on offense. And so, I would hate to see Kalkbrenner get into early foul trouble against that string of opponents unless I'm playing against the great Blue Jays.
All right. If you guys want to work with Scott Spreitzer on a regular basis, you can do so. He's got loads of information. It's going to be stay off a game. You've heard that tonight. Text the word Doc Talk to the number 29022 and get the free $60 trial, the premium member picks from Scott, or visit docsports.com and sign up for the free 60 on the upper left-hand side of the website. All right, gentlemen. Rob, we're glad you could join us tonight. You were a little bit late, but, we'll let you slide. Well, you tried hard. Go drink a beer. You took some Alaskan beer home last night.
I'm on call. I'm killing the Pib Zero tonight.
Pib Zero? Who drinks Pib Zero?
Yeah, my son likes Pib, so it's like I get
Is
the
that-
Pib
is that
Zero
Mr.
for
Pib?
me.
Yes,
Yeah.
Mr. Pib
Oh, wow.
Zero.
I got to ask you something, Rob.
It's
I
diet-
need to
it's
ask you earlier,
diet
before we go off the air real quick. I got a buddy out here in Vegas who wants to know, and he watches the show, what's Jared Tomich up to these days?
He's
Oh, boy,
farming.
his-
He's
Is he?
farming. Yeah.
He's
I've talked to him on
in-
Facebook. He's
Okay. Yeah.
He
Big
was
fans
back
out here
in-
of his.
Yeah, he was back in the Chicago area. I thought he was back in Illinois.
Yeah, he's running like the Tomich
So-
Farms. I
wow.
told him, I've been talking to him on Facebook. I said, hey, next time you're in the area, come up, be a guest on the podcast. We'd love to catch up.
He'd
But
be a good one. He's got a great story. I mean,
Yeah.
that was back in the old gray shirt Prop 48 era.
Yeah.
And he was a
Tell-
guy who was originally like a Prop 48 walk on. I mean, and if you sit and talk with him, I mean, it was kind of like there was a lot of circumstances. The guy's smarter than hell, but
Tell
he's
him
a
there's
great
a group
guy.
of Las Vegas Nebraskans who want to know what he's up to. So
Yeah, so he's doing great. I talked to him he was at the 94 reunion again for the Colorado game this year, and I chatted with him then. He's doing great, looks great.
cool.
Excellent. For Scott Spreitzer, for Dr. Rob Zatechka, I'm Travis Justice. We will talk to you next week on Behind the Point Spread. Thanks for watching that, everybody. Give this video a like and subscribe to the channel.